Okay, today's daf is daf nun base. We're going to finish up at the end of daf nun aleph. And this is going on in the Mishnah. In the Mishnah, we saw three scenarios of somebody's at a distance coming into town, and he designates his eruv at a particular place beneath a tree or at a fence or something beyond where he is in order to make it into town. And that's called Makam Ploni. Somebody saying that particular place should become my eruv. And then we saw two other versions of making an eruv, which are the classic: putting a bread out or meal out at a particular place outside of the city, or if somebody says Makomi, my place, where I am currently should be my eruv, and this is somebody that's in town and goes out to make an eruv. We saw machlokes in the Mishnah of whether an ani or can do that, or only an ani, or also an usher can do that. What's an ani and usher? A poor person and a rich person. And as we explained in the Mishnah, we explained and we saw yesterday in the Gemara, doesn't mean a rich person or a poor person. It means someone who can put food down counts as a rich person, and somebody who cannot put food down, that's a poor person. So somebody that can put food should put food. That's what Rabbi Meir says, according to Rav Nachman. So Rav Nachman says the machlokas is in a case where somebody says Makomi, my place, meaning they're trying to make an eruv not by putting food down, but by actually going to the point where they want to make their Shabbos space, and by doing so, they would define their eruv. To which Rabbi Meir says, no, you need to put food, and Rabbi Yehuda says that it's valid even if you don't put down food. Michael?
Yes?
I want to check if Rick can get on. I see he's still not on, and yesterday he had trouble, and I couldn't get to see.
How do I check that?
Oh, I see he just got on. Okay, forget it.
Okay.
Well, that's it. So again, according to Rav Nachman, the machlokas between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir is if somebody can afford to put down a bread, meaning they're home, and they are able to put down a bread. However, they go down to the place where they want to make an eruv themselves and say, my place is my place for Shabbos. Rabbi Yehuda said that works. Rabbi Meir says it doesn't work. However, everybody agrees that in order to define your space beyond where you are, saying Makam Ploni, the tree that's between here and the city should be my place, that doesn't work. That doesn't work unless you're a traveler and you cannot afford food. All right, are people still having trouble getting on? Give me a moment.
Recently, you had to put in a password. Before that, we didn't have to do that. I wonder if people are having problems with the password.
Send that to him. Let's see.
Password is also like very difficult to break. It's a very high encryption on the universal Jewish password.
Right.
What is it?
While we're waiting, it's 6:13, by the way. So the old Mead Street.
I was going to put Hebrew Dan's Taryag and see if it works.
The old Mead Street location was at 136 Southwest Mead Street.
Yeah.
And the lockbox on there was set to 613. And of course, you could punch it in any order. So you could get your key just by typing in the address.
Yeah. Okay. I put that on. Neil Simon was also trying to get on, so I sent it to him. Okay, back to the Gemara. So, according to Rav Nachman, Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda agree. If you put out food, that's going to be sufficient. Also, they agree if you are a traveler and you don't have food with you, so you can't put food, you may not have food with you, or it's a distance, so you can't put food down for your Eruv, but you know of a place between you and the city, and you want to define that as your Eruv, say my Shabbos is at that tree trunk or at that marker, that's okay. But only for someone who's a traveler and doesn't have food with him and can't get food there. However, the machlokas is if I walk to a particular place, I'm there right now, and I say, this is my Shabbos place. And I can afford to bring bread. I have bread that I could put, a meal at home that I could put there, and I don't. Rabbi Meir says it's not a valid Eruv. Rabbi Yehuda says it is valid. That's Rav Nachman's interpretation of that machlokas. However, Rav Chisda says that no, that the machlokas is in regards to the traveler who can say at a distance makom ploni, and to that he says there Rabbi Yehuda says it doesn't have to be a traveler. Anybody can define a distant space as their eruv, and only Rabbi Meir says that it has to be a traveler. However, everybody agrees that you can make your eruv by standing there or by putting bread there. So now the Gemara is going to try and prove this from the story of the. John is asking that the intent is going to be the issue, the declaration of intent. Over here, we're going to see soon that there's a machlokas if you even need a declaration of intent or not. In any case, so we have we have a story over here to define this question of Rav Nachman. So we have Rav Nachman and Rav Chisda. So the Gemara is going to bring us a proof. Amar Rav Yehuda, and this is the first wide line. On Nun Aleph, Amar Aleph 51b, the first wide line. Amar Rav Yehuda told a story. Masa, there was a story with the people in a place called Beis Mamel, Ba'anshe Beis Mamel, Alshe Beis Gurion, and the people in a place called Beis Gurion, Ba'aruma, okay, in this place Aruma. They were giving out dried fruits to the poor during a famine. And 4,000 amma away from them were these villages called Shichin, Kfar Shichin and Kfar Hanania, the village of Shichin and Hanania. And these people, what they would do is they would go midway between the 4,000 amma to the 2,000 amma mark. And this way, Lamachras, the next morning, Mashkima, they could wake up, Ubayin, and go the other 2,000 and get the food. Now, they essentially didn't put a bread down at that particular point. They came in person and stood at the space, and that defined their space for Shabbos, that they can go further, even though they didn't put out bread. And even though that they were poor people, but they had something at home that they could have brought there to make their meal there, and they didn't, just personally being there. So you see, according to Rabbi Yehuda, the machlokas is in regards to whether or not I can, on my own, myself being there, can define the eruv, or do I need bread? Rav Ashi says the Mishnah also seems that way. The Ktani, Misha Yotza Leilich Le'ir Shema'arvin. And the next Mishnah tells a story, tells a case of somebody who has a home in two places, in two villages, and each one these villages are 4,000 amma between. And he sets off before Shabbos to go to the other village. And then his friends say, don't go now, it's too hot. Don't go now, it's too cold. And he turns around. However, he was going to be midway, so that's already an intent to be midway between the two cities, and that would have defined the Eruv for him and his friends. But he turned around and didn't end up doing it. But since he had already intended to go out, that's going to make the Eruv for himself, but not for his friends. His friends will turn them back. There, it won't work for them. But for him, it'll work because he already was huchzak. He already headed out to go. And his friend turned him back. He can go on Shabbos. His friends cannot. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda, that's what Rabbi Yehuda said. And we asked, what's the distinction between the two? He has two houses, and each one of the one in each village. And there's a Shnei Tchunim Shabbos b'neim, and it's 4,000 amma between them. So he needs to make an Eruv midway. Since he headed out, so it's as if he has no. He's a traveler, and as we said, a traveler is defined as someone who doesn't have the money, the bread to put down. So he can't afford to put it down. He's already a traveler, and therefore, for him, he can define a place even beyond where he is, saying, that place is my Shabbos space. However, the people that are back in town, they are people that are home. People that are home have breads. They are defined as wealthy, meaning that they have bread available to be put down, and they can't put it down. So you see, Alma b'chol makom ploini ani in asher lei. So we see that in order to be able to define a future space, a distant space, as your Shabbos space, you have to be a traveler. And only a traveler can do it, and somebody who has bread, somebody who's at home, cannot do so. Shmamina, this too is proof to Rab Nachman that everybody agrees only a traveler can make a distant space their Eruv, and that everybody agrees bread works as an Eruv, and the machlokas between Rab Meir and Rabbi Yehuda is what the main Eruv is. Do we say being there yourself is the best, and therefore if you're there you don't need a bread? That's Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. And Rabbi Meir says no, the main of an Eruv is having a bread, and only if you can't afford a bread or don't have a bread can you do it by being there yourself. Shmamina. So this is so that's a good proof. Masni lo Rav Chia bar Ashi. Rav Chia, the son of Rav Ashi, taught Chia bar Rav's son Chia. Kamei Rav, and it was in front of Rav, and he was teaching Rav's son Chia. And what did he teach him? Echad ani v'echad asher. A rich person or a poor person, meaning that regardless regardless of whether somebody has bread or not, he can make an Eruv by being there himself. Amalei Rav siyim banami halachik Rabbi Yehuda, and tell him also this is according to Rabbi Yehuda, as Rav Nachman explained, that Rabbi Yehuda says that you don't have to put down bread. You can just say makumi, my place is an Eruv, and it's going to be good. Meaning, wherever I'm standing is my Eruv for Shabbos. I don't have to put down a meal there, and it's going to be a valid Eruv, which is Rav Nachman's interpretation of Rabbi Yehuda, whereas Rabbi Meir is going to say, no, you Iker Eruv is with the Suda. The main of Eruv requires that you put down a meal. Rabbi bar Rab Chanan avaragil de asi ma'artivna lepumpadisa. Rabbi bar Chanan would come from this place Artivna to the place Pumpadisa. Amar tehesh vizasi betzinta, and he would do so even though that it was a distance beyond 2,000 amma. So he must have made an Eruv, and he was home. And what he would do while he was at home, he would say, my shvisa, I'm setting my Shabbos at a midpoint somewhere called Tzinta. Amalei Abaye. Now we're on 52b, Nun Beis Amud Aleph. 52a, Nun Beis Amud Aleph. Amalei Abaye said to my daitach. What's the reason that you're relying on this leniency, that you're sitting at home, you have bread, you have a meal, and you're sending and you're defining your place without sending anybody out there to put a meal down, and you're not going yourself to that point, but rather you're defining your Eruv at a distance. Why? Because Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yehuda, you're defining it based on the halacha being like Rabbi Yehuda, not like Rabbi Meir. However, this is based on Rav Chisda's interpretation of Rabbi Yehuda, who says that even someone who is at home and has a bread or has a meal is allowed to make an eruv at a distance without putting out a meal. Because Rav Chisda said that the machlokas between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda is in defining a distant space as your eruv, even though you didn't put down a meal. However, Rav Nachman said that that's not correct. That even Rabbi Yehuda agrees, you cannot make an eruv only if you're a traveler. Then you can make an eruv at a distance. However, if you're home, you either have to go there yourself, which Rabbi Yehuda holds is the main way to do it, or you have to put down a bread, which Rabbi Meir says is the main way to do it. But you cannot just make an eruv from a distance and say that tree 2,000 amma outside of the city is my eruv. So you, by defining Tinta as your eruv, doesn't work. And the Tanya Kavasei, we have a brisa. We just have a brisa and a mishnah that seem to indicate like Rav Nachman's interpretation. Amalei Hadrabi says, you're right, I'm going to retract, and I won't do that anymore. Amar Rama Ba'chama Harei Amru Shabbos Yeshlo Dalad Abbas. Somebody that Shabbos, somebody who defined his Shabbos space, he has Dalad Amas wherever he's standing. That means if I go out 2,000 amma outside of the city, at the end of the of the border of where I'm allowed to walk in Shabbos, and I'm going to create that as my Shabbos space, then I can go another 2,000 amma. I actually can go 2,000 amma and 4. Why? Because where I am gives me 4 amos. So not only do I have the 4 amos, but I can also go beyond the 4 amos, 2,000 amma. So we said that whoever is Shabbos, wherever the person is, and defines their Shabbos space, they have 4 amos. What about if I put out a bread? If I put out my meal, do I also have that 4 amma space for my bread, and then I get the 2,004 amma from where I place the eruv? Or do we only say that for the person, not for the bread? Amar Rava, so Rava said, Toshamakam, let's prove this. We only said that you can put out a bread in order to make it easier for someone who already has bread in his home so that he can send bread and he doesn't have to go in person. He doesn't have to go out in person and stand there for sunset, for the onset of Shabbos. He doesn't have to be at that place, but rather he can send the bread and put a meal there. Now, and if you tell him he loses the opportunity to have the additional 4 amma, so then you didn't make it easier for him. You made it worse for him. It's not a leniency, it's a stringency, because if he goes out in person, he has 2,004 amma that he can walk. And instead, by putting out a bread, you made it easier on him, but he also loses out 4 amma. It says still, but it's still a benefit. And it's a benefit that he has a choice. He can either go there and get the extra 4 amma, or he can put a bread there, and now he has the choice of not needing to stand there for the onset of Shabbos. That's still a benefit, even if it's at the expense of 4 amma. So that's not proof that he also has a 4 amma. You made it, Neil. Sorry about all the Zoom changes. New system.
I should have guessed that password.
Yeah. We made it difficult. Anybody that can guess the password, I guess, is allowed to come and learn with us. Okay. Next Mishnah. We are in 52b at the Mishnah. Mi sheyatza leilech be'ir shema'arvim ba ve'chzira chaveira. Somebody who left with the intent of going from his city to another city. He left from his village to go to another village. Now, as the Gemara is going to explain to us, he has a home in both of these places. However, there are 4,000 amma between them. And he's intending to go midway, define the space for himself and his friends, and then the next day they're able to all walk to the other village. His friends turn him back and say, it's too hot, it's too cold, come back. Don't go. Hu mutalelech. He can continue walking on Shabbos, even though he came back. He can walk on Shabbos. The chol bnei ha'ir asurim. However, the people of the city, they're not allowed to go. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. That's Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. Rabbi Meir says kol shu yachal la'ariv v'lo iriv arei zachamar gamel. Rabbi Meir says actually he's worse off than his friends. Anybody that could have made an eruv but didn't, he loses on both ends. Chamar gamel, if you remember, somebody who leads a camel leads from front, a donkey from the side or back, and so this guy loses. He can't go. He doesn't have the front. He doesn't have the back. So Rabbi Meir says he actually loses. He doesn't have the city that he's coming from because he's already set out. So that's not his place for Shabbos. He didn't get to the eruv to define it, so he didn't define that either. So he can't walk 2,000 amma from the city because maybe the city is not his space anymore. He can't walk from the eruv because he didn't define the eruv yet. So since he set out to make an eruv, he negated his dwelling in the village that he left, and he also never made the eruv where he's going to, and so he actually is in limbo and he cannot move from anywhere. So that's Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yehuda says, however, he gains the eruv. So maishna ihu maishnu maishna inhu. Why is he different than them? He went out to make an eruv for them. They turned him around, said, come back. He came back. He can travel. They can't. Amar Rav Huna, Acham Maiskina. So Rav Huna says, here's what's missing in the Mishnah. There are two houses, one in village A, one in village B. He's got them both. Now, they're in village A with friends. But there's two Techum Shabbos, meaning there's 4,000 amma between the villages. So in order to travel from one to the other on Shabbos, you need to put down an eruv or B yourself between A and B at the onset of Shabbos. So Friday afternoon, he sets out to go to that place. However, his friends tell him, turn back. It's too hot. It's too cold. It's not a good weather to be out there right now. So kivan the nafak le'urcha, as soon as he sets out to go there, havaleyani. He's now a traveler, which we defined as a poor person, meaning because he doesn't necessarily have bread that he can afford to put down, or he can't get to the place to put down at the place he's making an eruv. So he's a traveler, so there's a leniency for him to define a distant space even though he's not there. Vahani, but the people who never left the town and tell him come back, ashirininu, they are considered wealthy, meaning they have breads because they're home. So they have meals that they can go and put out. So for them, they need to actually be there or put out a bread. But he, as a traveler, is allowed to define even a distant space. Tanya Namihachi, we have a brisa that's more explicit and explains it this way. Somebody has two houses and two villages, and in between them 2,000 amma. The 4,000 amma, two the full Shabbos lengths. Kivin shehifsik baderech kana eruv divrei Yehuda. As soon as he sets out, he now defined his space for Shabbos at that place. Yes, or okay, number Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda said even further. Afilu matzeh chavera. Even if his friends tell him and find him and say to him, "Mamalei lin poin, no, come back here, stay with us overnight and go out tomorrow because es chamahi, it's way too hot right now, or es tzina, it's too cold right now. Don't go there and wait at the tchum for the onset of Shabbos." He the next day can go out and go the full distance because it's as if he made the eruv at that point, and they cannot. Amar Rabba Leimar Kulal Malipli. Now here we get to John's point that he made earlier. This fellow who set out, did he say something and say, "I'm making my eruv at that midpoint," or was it the intent? Even though he didn't say a thing, just setting out, walking out of his house to go to that midpoint is sufficient.
I had a different question. This person who's this rich person, and he's got two houses, he's got three houses, whatever. He likes staying in different houses. So he's got a fully equipped kitchen in every house, and he goes where he wants to shop sometimes. Does he need an eruv at all? I mean, they're his houses. Why isn't that kind of shvisa?
No, you're right, for sure. Michael's asking, he's got a meal in both houses. Why does not define both of them as a space? That would be good if there was less than 2,000 amma between them. But if there's more than 2,000 amma between them, so he cannot go the 2,000 amma. He needs a meal midway to be able to extend his eruv.
I thought it was describing that it was the houses were midway. That's
No,
not the description.
there's a house in each village, and there's a full two eruv spaces between them. So he needs a midway eruv
Got it.
to allow him to go.
So if he had a country house, so to speak, halfway between this city and that city, he's good to go. Whenever he wants to.
Right, but he doesn't. He has a full 4,000 amma distance between them, and he needs to put down a meal to allow him to go between A and B.
So question then, if he has these two houses and they're 2,002 almost apart, can he use his personal 4 almost to bridge that gap if he goes to that middle point?
Right on. Yeah,
Okay.
let's see in a minute. Yeah, that's great. We see that you have an additional 2 amma as we see in the next Mishnah. So he essentially has that additional 2 amma space that he can go because he has 4 amma at his personal space, which gives him 2 amma to still be in the Eruv. Yeah. If it's exactly 2002, he can go. Right on. So, Rabbi says, of course he has to state, I'm making my Eruv midway. But not only that, the machlokas is, does he also have to set out to walk? Or is it sufficient if he just stated it? Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Yosef said, no, the other way around. Of course, you have to start beginning to walk there. Not only that, ki pligi loimar, you also have to state it. And there's a long Rashi to define what these 2 points are. We're just going to go with this simple first interpretation of Rashi. Now the Gemara says, Kaman Ozo, whose opinion is this? Ula said, he set off to go to the midpoint to make his Eruv at midway. And his friends turned him back and said, come back, stay here, and then you go out tomorrow. Harim umuchzar umuchzak. He's both returned and has already defined himself as a traveler. Now, imuchzar lamamuchzak. If he's returned, how is he a traveler? And imuchzak, and if he's defined himself as a traveler, lamamuchzar, why is he returned? Hachi kamar. So this is what he means to say. Af al pisha muchzar, even though that he went back, since he took a step out of the house to go to define his space midway, that's going to define his space, even though he came back muchzak. Nevertheless, it's as if he's a traveler and he's defined, and he was allowed to define his space at a distance and say 2,000 amma from here, at that tree, at that fork in the road, whatever it is, I have defined my eruv. Come on, Rav Yosef, Va'aliba de Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda. This is like Rav Yosef said, that he has to also walk. And like Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda, which is that he can make this Eruv outside of the city. That he and he has to sit and make a statement and say, or this could also be Rabbah, according to Rabbi Yehuda, that you need both to say that you're going out where you make the Eruv and you walked out, which is what John said before. You have to state your intent. It wouldn't just be enough to walk out and it looks like you want to make an Eruv midway. And this is what John said earlier, that you need, throughout Shas, you see that you need to state intent in this case. Rav Yehuda bar Ishtasa. So Rav Yehuda, this Rav Yehuda bar Ishtasa, it's a name. I see like a Kollel the Peri Rav Nosson bar Eshai. He brought a basket of fruit to Rav Nosson bar Eshai. He have a azil shavke adenachas darga. When he was leaving, and this is on Friday, he's leaving to go back to town, and he was going to go back to his home, and his home is 4,000 amma away. So he had to go back before Shabbos because otherwise he's not allowed to get there unless he made an Eruv midway. So Rav Yehuda waited. Rav Nosson bar Eshai waited for Rav Yehuda to take a step outside of the house and become a traveler to go back home on Friday. Once he took a step back out, he said, by the way, you're welcome to stay here for Shabbos and then go tomorrow morning. Once he took that step, he was defined as a traveler, he said, go ahead, make your Eruv midway and come back and stay with me for Friday night, sleep here, and you can go out in the morning. You don't have to travel now as Shabbos is coming in. Amalei, come stay with me overnight, and then you go tomorrow. Turn the page. Nun Beis Amud Beis, 52b. Come on, Rabbi Yosef. This is the opinion of Rabbi Yosef. Alibid Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda, which we just said that as soon as he walked a hichzik and he defined himself as a traveler, this is he's allowed to make an eruv beyond the space. According to Rabbi, we'd also have to state it and say, this is my place. Gemara says, Loi, Karava, and Karaba, Valibid Rabbi Yehuda. This is like Rabbi, and according to Rabbi Yehuda, that as soon as he's a traveler, his intent alone would be sufficient to define him as someone who defined his space. Tosa says over here that it's a lengthy Rashi, as we said, and as we defined, Rashi's the second version of Rashi, and Tosa over here are going to define that you always have to also state and say that is my space, and that's what's going here. That's going on here. So he not only did he walk out of the place, but he also defined midway as his space, and that would be sufficient for him to have created the Eruv midway, and he can stay overnight as a guest and walk the full 4,000 amma, 2,000 amma to his Eruv, and 2,000 amma from the Eruv to his place, because he was a traveler and defined the space. That's going to be his place. Rameir Omer Kol Sheyachal Ha'arev. Rabbi Meir says, however, no, he loses it, and because he loses his space because he set out, so he's no longer here, and he didn't get to the place he's going, so that's not his place either. So he's a chamar gamal. He loses on both ends. Well, we already learned this idea that in a doubt, Rabbi Meir says you lose both ends. Sufik, whether you put out an eruv or not. Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda Eimer, Marez a chamar gamal, that you lose out. In case the eruv is there, you cannot go the other side of the city. In case the eruv is not there, so you can't go this side of the city. Amar of Sheshes, Suffolk Eruv, Suffolk Le'eruv. Well, over here, it's not because there's a doubt whether he made the Eruv or not, because that's true. The Hava Chamar Gamel, that Ava Vadai Le'eruv, but over here, for sure he didn't make the Eruv. The Hava Chamar Gamel, I may have thought, you know what? Since according to Rabbi Meir, he for sure did not make the Eruv at the 2,000 distance, maybe he still could define his space within the city, and therefore he has the 2,000 amma around the city. That's why this Mishnah is telling us that even if he for sure didn't make the Eruv, because he set out, never got to make the Eruv, and then he turned back, so he's back in town for the onset of Shabbos. Perhaps it's perhaps this place is his Eruv. No, it's not. Over here, he for sure didn't make an Eruv, so maybe the town is his place. Still, Rabbi Meir says he's a Chamar Gamal on account of that because he left the town with the intent of going to his other home, he's already defined for Shabbos by his actions that he doesn't want this place to be his Shabbos space. And Rabbi Meir holds he loses this and he doesn't have the new place, so he cannot budge. The next Mishnah brings us into what John reminded us, a machlokas of if somebody steps out of the 2,000 amma, how much out does he have? How much leeway? What grace period? What buffer zone is there? So first opinion, somebody steps out of the Tehum, so out of his city, 2,000 amma and one. You're out. you cannot budge. You're out of your Eruv. You lose your Eruv. All you have is 4 amas. However, Rabbi Eliezer, no, if you're within 2 amma, you're allowed to get back in. You're 3 amma, you cannot. You're in your 3rd amma out, you cannot get back in anymore. And as the Gemara explained earlier, we'll see that this is based on a person has 4 amma, 2 on each side, and therefore, as long as he's within the 2 amma of the Tehum, there's an overlap of his personal space of 2 amma on his on one side into the 2,000 amma, and since they overlap, he's allowed in. Rabbi Chanina. So Rabbi Chanina said, wherever his end point is, he's got 1 foot in and 1 foot out. Lo yekanes, it can no longer get back in. For it says, Im toshiv mishabas raglecha. We read this on Yom Kippur in the Haftorah. If you hold back your feet on Shabbos from walking, right, in toshiv mishabas raglecha, so you have to stay put on Shabbos. And even though it says raglecha, your feet, raglecha, it's written without the yud, which tells you which is spelled like raglecha, the single. Raglecha ksiv. So Gemara says, "Vatanya raglei achas b'techat chum ragla achas chutzutum ikones." But the Bryce actually says that if 1 foot in and 1 foot out, he's allowed to come back in. Hamani acherimi. That opinion is acherim, which is usually Rabbi Meir. Natanya acherim omrim, as we learned, acherim say, others say, which is Rabbi Meir, l'makim sharubayhu niskar. We define a space by where his majority of his torso, his body is. Yes, 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Yeah. So if the majority of his body is still in the Eruv, even though that 1 foot is out, he's allowed to come back in. Ikka da Amri, Amar B'chanina. Some say Reb Chanina's statement is the other way around. Raglei achas b'toich hatchum and raglei achas chutz hatchum yikones. He's allowed to come back in with 1 step out. Why? Because the chsivim tashim Shabbos or gelecha, it says if you will hold back from your feet from traveling, in other words, you will rest your feet on Shabbos. So, and it says feet plural. So as long as your feet are within your resting space, within your 2,000 amma, you're good. Even though 1 is out, but they're not both out, so you're fine. Raglecha karina, and we read it in the plural, raglecha. Vatanya leyekanis. But we have a Bryce that says that you should not come back in if you have 1 foot out. But Rabbi Chanina follows the opinion of Acherim that you're allowed to come back in. The Tanya l'makom sheruba in Niskar, wherever the majority of his body is, he can come back. Yes. Yes, Neil. Thank you. Rabbi Eliezer says you have a grace of 2 amma. If you're 2 amma out, since that's still within your personal space, you can come back in. But we have a Bryce that says 1 amma, you can go out and then come back in. 2, you cannot go out and you cannot come back in. So it's 2 in the Brisa, when it said 2, you can no longer come back. It means that you've already gone a full 2. You're up to 3 into the 3rd amma. So you've completed 2 amma outside of your tehum. You can no longer come back in. However, our Mishnah is talking about 2 means within the 2nd amma. You haven't gotten to the 3rd amma yet. Then you're allowed to come back in. But we have a Brisa that says even 1 amma you cannot go out and then come back in. There, it's not talking about somebody who is himself went for a walk, but rather this is a measure, and meaning that somebody who doesn't know exactly where it is and is measuring 2,000 amma by taking steps in order to get to the city, right? So there, it's an approximation of 2,000 amma, he doesn't have any leeway beyond the 2,000 amma that he measured, because he's guesstimating based on steps. The Tanan, as we learned, somebody who's measuring, meaning he's just taking steps in order to get to the Eruv, that person, or to 2,000 amma. And as we saw, if somebody doesn't know how much is an amma, so he just takes Pesios Beinanios, basic steps, and that's going to be how he's going to define his Shabbos space. That is such a person, even if he ended in a ma'ara, in a cave, which we said, since it's an enclosed place, he should be allowed to go the entirety of that space. Since we don't know for sure, and this is a leniency we give for a traveler, that he can take these steps in order to get there, he only has a 2,000 amma exact and no more. Last Mishnah of the Perek. Somebody who was traveling and it became dark and he's outside of the tchum of the city. He gets an additional 15 amma. First, the opinion says even if he's 2,001 amma away from the city, he cannot go. However, he has a 15 amma grace, and if he's outside of the Tehum, 15 amma, he's allowed into the city. Why? Because the people measuring the Tehum out of the city, so they do so by ropes. They had a rope, let's say a rope of 10 amma, and they're moving them along, and they always take a little bit less not to make any mistakes. And so you have these 15 amma grace, so that nobody makes a mistake. And therefore, if you're at up to 15 amma outside of the Tehum of the city, you're allowed to come in, as long as at the onset of Shabbos, you weren't any farther than that. It says, Tana, mepnei toei hamida, because those that make a mistake in the measurements, and they don't know the exact place, and they're going to end up going out and come back in. So therefore, since we have an additional distance that they're allowed in and allowed out, if somebody as a grace, as a mistake area, so you have up to 15 amma outside of every city. So even though there's a marker that says up until here is the Tehum Shabbos, you actually have 15 amma beyond that. And if you got there before sunset, before the onset of Shabbos, you're within that grace area, you can continue traveling into the city. With this, we complete the fourth parak of Eruvin. We should come back to you. Be'ezus Hashem Yisbarach.
Am I making it up? But I think they found a few of these Zimanim in Eretz Yisrael.